Thanks so much. First, I'm going to move this to the right, so because I will knock it over, and that is not a good result. There we go. Well, very warm welcome and a good morning to everybody. It's certainly. My name's Jeff. I have the privilege to serve on staff here in a pastoral capacity. I love that we get to gather. It's only been a few days, 4 days since Christmas Eve, and this is the same shirt I wore on Christmas Eve, and I have not washed it. All right? And yeah, I'm being completely honest. I did sweat a little bit under the armpits on Christmas Eve, but I'm wearing an inner shirt. Oh, the button's come undone. That's a little bit sorry about that. And so I guarantee that if you get a hug, you'll also get some splices of smell and dinner and all that, all right? And so welcome back again. I love it's. We are on the cusp of 2026, and whenever I think about the new year that's to come, there's always a little jingle, new year, and then you get the gym advertisements come out, finance companies say, save more money, invest more, lose weight, build muscle. And so the theme that's always gets pushed out is new year, new you, all right? And that was initially the topic, well, it was just like a side topic of this talk. It's so cliche, I really did not like it, right? And so today we talk about the promise of the new economy. And new year, new you. Now, you and I know that oftentimes the ticking over the new year is symbolically healthy as a means to begin a new practice, right? And so we may not begin a new practice, we may drop some things, but oftentimes we begin something new. And if you've signed up to a gym membership hoping to begin on the 1st of January, I applaud you. And so most people will probably drop that membership after 3 months. That's a thing that happens, right? And so these gym companies are like, yeah, we're raking in the money. Or you might start a new diet or release, maybe not eat as much salt, whatever it is, but it's going to come back on. And it's just the way things are. Habits are hard to kick. Now, it really highlights that New Year's resolutions to do more things are actually flawed fundamentally. And if we fail or if we don't succeed in a resolution, it might be seen as a failure or a regression. But I actually beg to differ because New Year's resolutions, doing more things, adapting a new lifestyle actually highlights that we have limitations. New initiatives highlight existing limitations. And that's a sign that show yourself some grace. So new initiatives highlight existing limitations. We're going to test this theory by doing hands up in the air, a fun little survey, and we all get to participate, okay? So we're once all children, and some here are still, there's one child in here, but some were once children. And so growing up, who wanted a pet? Put your hand up if you wanted a pet growing up. Some of you didn't want a pet. How surprising. All right, so leave your hand up if you wanted a pet. Now keep your hands up if you actually got a pet. Keep your hands up if you got a pet. All right, keep your hands up. Okay, good. Now, keep your hands up if you said that you would take care of it as a condition of getting that pet. Okay, so some of us have confessed that we would take care of it as a condition of getting that pet. Keep your hands up if your parents did all the taking care of that pet. All right, so there we go. So we're truthful in that, all right? So you said, I'm going to do it. But actually, what happened was your parents ended up taking care of it, all right? And so, I know children and adults, and there's a difference between child and adult. And, adults, we're more weary of our limits and our capacities. Children are less so. But it got me thinking, actually, when I was, and Mom and Dad, if you're watching, this is cue for you, right? And so when I was 12, they promised me a dog. And my sister and I a dog. And when I turned 12, we never got a dog. And so parents, don't make promises to your children that you cannot fulfill, right? We remember these things, and I'm like, this is 30 years on. I still remember we never got a dog. And so what did they get? They got us a goldfish. That's like the that's like the fourth best next option. So we got a goldfish, and we'll take care of it. And guess who eventually ended up taking care of it? My dad. It's like algae, and they get cold, and they sort of die, and you get a little thermometer, right? But this highlights that we have limitations. We have capacity limitations. And as adults, managing capacity actually matters. Managing our capacity with boundaries makes a real difference. And so oftentimes when we make a New Year's resolution, I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week, a month, if you're, I don't know, whatever you're, I'm going to eat this or do less of this. We oftentimes don't take into our existing capacities. And that's why there is such I wouldn't say there's a high failure rate, there's such a resistance, a challenge to what we want to achieve. And so this is where we sort of come to our inspiration for today, and we're going to look at Moses and Jethro. Now, Moses is one of my favorite characters in Scripture. I love Moses that he is so brutally honest. I love that he is a leader, but he's also a leader in the making. And so Moses and Jethro, now if you don't know about these two, who are they? Well, Moses, I hope you do know about. I'm not going to go too much detail into that. But Moses is Jethro's essentially son-in-law, and so we got son and father-in-law. This is their relationship, all right? And so at this point, before we read into this particular passage, Moses has led his people out of exile, and so that's a pretty big job. Imagine leading around 2 million people out of exile. It's a big job, right? I can lead maybe 5 people out of the church into a park, and then I might lose one, but he led 2 million people out of exile. And the people have complained about, man, I was so sick of eating carbs. Carbs only, carbs. And I'm team carbs, man. Who's team carbs? Yeah, right? Bread, yeah, high five for bread, right? And so I'm team carbs, but then these guys are like, we're sick of carbs. And then so God gives them protein. He gives, like birds, quail. Who likes quail? Who likes protein, right? So who likes chicken and steak. Yes, a lot of us probably had a lot of protein during Christmas Eve and soon in the new year, all right? So carbs and proteins, they got that. And then they said, well, we're thirsty. So they get water from a rock, boom, and then the rock, water comes out. And so Moses is extraordinarily tired. Think about it. He's tired from leading his people, and he hasn't even had a chance to deal with his own stuff yet. Complaints, people, let alone himself. All right? And so in parallel, Jethro hears about this victory of Moses leading his people out of exile, and as a wonderful father-in-law, Jethro decides to visit Moses with Moses' family. And this is where we take off from Exodus chapter 18. So let's read this and a few verses together. Well, actually, you don't have to read it. I'll read it. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' son and wife, came to him in the wilderness where he was camped near the mountain of God. So it's a very holy site. And so Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons. And almost as if it was like a time machine, boom, straight away. Next verse, so Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. They greeted each other and then went into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake. So not for Moses' sake, but Israel's sake, and about all the hardships they had met along the way and how the Lord had saved them. And so Moses is having a nice moment just to release all this stuff. In Cantonese, he was like sun, just releasing it all out to all the people around him. Goes on to say, the next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. Now when his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, what is this you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening? And he goes on to say, Moses answered him, because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. And we come to the final slide. It says this. Moses' father-in-law replied, what you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen to me, and I will give you some advice, and we fast forward that advice, that will make your load lighter. And so what's going on here? We have an outsider, Jethro. He comes in, and he gives him some wonderful advice to make his life easier. But Jethro sees that his son-in-law, let's just say son, just so easy is, son is overwhelmed, and there's some overwhelming themes that are happening in the life of Moses. And oftentimes, it would take an outsider to our lives to realize that stuff isn't working well. And so if we look at some overarching themes, Moses lacked leadership discernment. If we look at the lifestyle, the story of Moses, pseudo-son to Pharaoh, you could say he was quite an independent individual, one-man band who tried to lead the the revolution by killing the Egyptian guard, one-man band, and then he self-exiled, one-man band in the desert for 40 years, tending sheep most of the time. Get called by God, one-man band, one-man band, one band. He's a very single-focused leader. He had mental models of leadership that he had developed over the years that had stuck. And then we read in verse 13, the next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. See, the thing about this one-man band notion in our head, and a lot of us actually have that, this independent thing that we do, is that we don't realize that change is required based on your circumstance. And so Moses would sit here day after day, listen to people complain, and he'll resolve these things, just Moses himself and lines of people from morning till evening. And it didn't occur to Moses that change needed to happen. See, the leadership model that worked during the Exodus did not work for a season of stability. If you think about this, the needs of a startup are different to the needs of an enterprise. And this is reflected in how you serve, how you work, how you love, how you lead, just as Moses did. And so Moses was so busy, he could not discern the leadership needs. The next thing we see is that Moses lacked leadership foresight. See, Jethro is so brilliant. The next verse, it says this, why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around from morning till evening? See, leadership foresight, or the lack of it, is most visible. And you've all experienced this. It's most visible when the people around you and yourself are languishing. When your boss, your manager, or your leader, or senior leader, they don't serve the people in the best interest, and the people around them languish, this is what's happening. They're sitting around from morning till evening. Think about this. When you wait at a bank for an hour, you get annoyed, right? When you wait at the MTR station for 5 minutes, you get annoyed. But these guys are waiting from morning till evening. Now, think about the temperature. Oftentimes in these parts of the world, it's super cold in the morning and super cold in the evening, but it's super hot in the daytime. Imagine how much stuff they have to carry. There's no 7-Eleven. They bring all their own food, all their own water. How do you keep the food from going off? It's a big deal. And so the people are languishing. And Moses, you could say, didn't realize the impact to his own people. The third thing that we see is that Moses lacked trusted support. See, when you lack trusted support, when you lack, this is a key word, accountability, oftentimes you fly solo and you are essentially your own boss without much, accountability. You remain blind and oblivious to what is and is not happening. And so without Jethro, Moses probably would have continued in the same manner of leadership as he did. No accountability. Here's a really careful note, actually, to all of us who engage in different ministries out there. If you join a ministry or you be part of a ministry where there is a solo leader without accountability to other people, be very careful. Be very careful, especially if it's things on deeply spiritual, engaging matters. And I say this because this is how cults begin, all right? This is why community church and many, many churches have counsel to keep us in good shape. It's called councils, elder boards, deacons. This is really important. And so Moses lacked this trusted support. Now, what happens when people get disgruntled and they get annoyed with one another? Well, actually, what happens is a division happens in the church. The leader isn't operating the right way. People get disgruntled, there's conflict, there's uprising, and the worst case scenario, people leave the church. Or maybe they go and start their own thing. Uprisings happen. This is what happens when the leader's power is left unchecked. And the last thing that we see with Moses is he lacked realization. From one crisis to another, he lacked the headspace to reflect and to slow down and think about what worked and what did not work. And so when there's no room to think about these things, guess what gets the most attention? The thing that yells the loudest. You always hear about this, right? Whoever yells the loudest gets the most attention. This is what's happening. Now, it's easy to reverse these lessons as an application for us, and absolutely these are true. We need discernment, we need foresight, we need accountability, and we need realization in hindsight of what's going on. But this is not the point of today. See, the point of today is that Jethro suggests that Moses make a significant change to his leadership style from autocratic to democratic leadership style. The point of today was that Moses made a change to shift his style to create more capacity so he could achieve more by doing less. That is the point. He created capacity so he could get more effective in what he was doing. He set up a leadership structure. And this is the part we didn't read in the verses before. He set up a leadership structure where he empowered those with integrity and those with competency and capability to make decisions for him, to do these judicial civil cases of judgment for him. And all the tricky stuff that had never been encountered before, Moses would do. Now, a few months ago, we talked about Zelophehad's daughters. I don't know if you remember this message, but Zelophehad's daughters, they were left without inheritance because their father had died and there were no other sons in line. And so these daughters came to Moses and said, hey, we're left high and dry, come on. And so this is the types of cases that Moses would handle as a result of this judicial system. It's called case law, right? And so Moses kept the difficult ones for himself and he gave out the other ones to other people. And so Moses created capacity so he could do more with less. But really, it's not simply just about capacity, because today we're talking about the promise of the new economy. See, Moses stepped into a new economy. Now, economy is like a trade thing, you know. You think about you buy and you sell, a supplier and the other opposite of supplier, what? Receiver, whatever those words are, right? Man, my brain is not working. It's like New Year's Eve, right? And so this new economy effectively moves Moses away from control, power, authority, one-man band, and moves him into more of a, let's just shout the responsibility. This is the new economy for him. And it doesn't make sense that this leader of such a patriarchal society would disperse this power out. It says in John 12:24, we get a glimpse of this new economy where Jesus says, very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Now, I've actually seen this in life groups in my previous church, and one life group that held on for such a long time, let's stay together, and it was falling apart. And when that life group eventually collapsed, guess what happened? 3 life groups were birthed from that collapse. It's a reverse economy. It doesn't make sense. But Jesus is speaking on himself here. If Jesus, think about it, if Jesus only came and he shared a good word, he did good deeds, he might be seen as a prophet. But because he died, because of his resurrection, guess what? We're all still here today. Look how many seeds are in this room and the global church. And so how does death bring new life? See, death is a tricky topic. So how does death bring new life? How does letting go of something, how does letting something die actually bring seeds of change or seeds of new life? See, this economy is countercultural, it's counter-society, it's counter-hoarding, counter-get everything as much as I can, as fast, it's counter-consumerism, counter-materialism. I think someone told me it's counter-neoliberalism, right? It doesn't make sense in today's world. It's the only economy where putting something to death actually does an advantage for you because it gives us capacity. And so how do we create capacity? It's very simply speaking, we release things to their death, we let them down to allow God to work in that free space that we've created. We release things, put them down to allow God to take up that free space that we've created. Colossians 3:5 gives us a really good description, quite a potent description on what we can put to death. It says, put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. A lot of bold claims here. Now, I'll pick an easy one, lust. We'll leave sexual immorality for Pastor Wade when he comes back. Pick an easy one, lust, right? Now, lust isn't just all like, sexy things, right? But if I lust for a position, or if I lust for something of the past that I wish I could have run a sub 3:30 marathon, if I keep thinking about that all the time, if it consumes me, that is lust. If I want that person, or I want to date that girl, or that boy, or that person over and over again, I keep thinking about that, that is lust. It's a desire. But here's the key, is that when that desire takes room over most of your heart, if not all of your heart, and you squeeze God out, that becomes something of an earthly nature. We forego God for the sake of this, you could say, this idolization of this thing. And so what happens when we idolize too much? Well, actually, we encounter spiritual death. Spiritual death is caused by things that hold you hostage. Think about this in your life. If you've obsessed over something to the point where that is all you think about, how are you as a person? How are you as a character? You've probably noticed that you become so single-minded, so focused, waiting on every message that comes through, waiting on every change that happens. Look at the stock market, 1 point, 2 point, 3 points up, but it's only $50 Hong Kong dollars, and you get so obsessed with these things, and your soul just lacks, and you forget the bigger picture. See, capacity isn't simply about how much time you can have, but it's about how much heart that you have free. And if we're seeking Jesus, it's how much heart that you have free for Jesus to birth new seeds in your life. One of my favorite authors, Pete Scazzero, he wrote a book. The series is called the Emotionally Healthy series, and he wrote The Emotionally Healthy Leader. And he says this: we don't navigate endings well when we can't stop ruminating about the past. I've been there, and most of us have been there as well, when we remain busy to prevent grieving endings and losses. This happens a lot. Actually, when people that we love pass away, and we're so busy organizing funerals and things that we forget to actually process and grieve ourselves. When we are envious to those without the same hardships, when we look at our lives, why is it so hard, and why is that person so blessed and we aren't? When we are dishonest with feelings, doubts, and hurts. When we remove or resent God in the process. So in the process of healing, or in the process of this terrible ending at work, maybe we got fired unjustly, we just say, we remove God for the process. There is no redemption. It is the end. But here's the difference. See, the promise of the new economy is that death isn't just loss-inducing. It isn't the final destination, and it brings and multiplies a life and is necessary for life. This is a promise of the new economy, as prescribed in John 12:24. And for a lot of us, even myself, it is a continual mindset change, a radical shift in how we view difficulty in life, how we view circumstances and loss and death and betrayal and tragedy. It is a radical, ongoing shift of that. It's not simply just doing more. It's not a New Year's resolution. It's much more than that. It's creating capacity. If we sort of apply this, it's not a doctoral frame. If we apply this framework to Moses, the death of Moses' single-minded leadership, autocratic style, birthed seeds of rest. He got rest. He developed clarity. He knew what his people needed. He got to disciple new leaders underneath him. He lived a sustainable leadership style and developed faith and trust in God. And so our challenge, actually moving into 2026, is this: is allow the power of Jesus and the Holy Spirit to birth new life. I wanted to update this, and it says to allow the power of Jesus and the Holy Spirit to release what needs to die to birth new life. This is where we engage. If we're mulling over something, constantly ruminating over something, we have to ask Jesus, help me to move beyond this thing. Set me free, release me from this thing. Last week I mentioned about this thing here, and now I'm going to ask this question again. Who speaks French? Put your hand up. All right, Natalie, can you read this out for me?
A little bit. Studying on Duolingo. Okay. Croix de chemin.
Okay, I like how you did that. You did this thing as well. Croix de chemin, right? It's very Parisian, right? Croix de chemin. Okay. Actually, we had David last week. He said it's croix de chemin. Croix de chemin. And it's like croissant, right? So the only thing as a croissant. It's so, I don't know, so completely generalized and stereotyped the entire French population. I apologize. Online. Croix de chemin. Yeah. So we tried. And a friend here, like Sylvia, she actually said, well, actually, no, the backstory of these crosses is quite a shemin, is that these were laid down by families who had lost loved ones on journeys beside the road. And so these are often next to the road, dangerous roads. And so when cars see them, they see these crosses, they're like, be aware, it's a dangerous corner, maybe it's a blind spot. And so these are laid down by these families that have lost people. And Sylvia said that in some other readings, these are known as the intersection between life and death, which when you think about it, it is. And we have these intersections in our lives on a daily basis. We have these quiet shamins in our lives on a daily basis about our thought life. Now, I want to close with a story. And you say, like, why the pigeon, right? Here's the thing. This one's a bit ratty, but I love white pigeons because they're like fake doves, right? You don't really see doves in Hong Kong. It's a white pigeon, beautiful pigeon. This one's got like an injury. It's got a little poopy on its wing. This was our photo I took yesterday in South Horizons. And there's a crazy story that happened yesterday morning when I was out with my wife and a little baby, and we'll go out for a walk, and a baby loves pigeons, and when he sees pigeons, he perks up, he goes, ah, right? And then, so we come across this path, and there's this one pigeon, and it's white pigeon, it's coming towards us, and it comes right to our feet. And I thought, oh, well, why don't we make this more enjoyable for a little baby? And so on the only occasion that we had a piece of toast with us, we never take bread off. We don't feed pigeons. We don't believe in that, all right? I'm an anti-pigeon feeder, right? But then there's a little crumb left in a tissue. And so, look, see if we've got anything left. And we found a little crumb, and I was about to feed it to pigeons so it could stick around a little longer. And then we hear, in a yelling, loud, very rude voice, "Don't feed that pigeon!" It's like, what? And it shocked all of us, or it shocked my wife and I. And we froze. And I looked up, and there's a person yelling at us, "Don't feed that pigeon!" And then, because I'm such a wonderful Jesus follower, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I said to her in Cantonese, "Lai Bing like, who are you? Who are you?" I was essentially questioning, what's your credibility to tell me what to do? There's a bit of pride coming out, right? And then she goes in Cantonese, "We fatinga, like, you're going to get fined. There's a penalty." And I'm like, I know this, right? I don't feed pigeons. My first time ever. First time ever feeding a pigeon. And then I asked her, "Le Bingoa, who are you?" And then, like, don't learn from me, please. And then because of her tone of voice and her rudeness towards us, I looked at her and I threw the crumb straight to the pigeon to eat, in spite of her. Thank you, Anna. Now, I know what I did wasn't right. It's a $1,500 fine, but I know that I wasn't going to get fined. I know she wasn't a police officer. I know that she wasn't a security guard at this complex. But what happened after that, she said, so we kept walking, and she said this, "You're a great man." It's like, oh, she's questioning my character. And then I knew I had to stop talking, because if I didn't stop, I would just let it rip. And then I love my wife. She goes, "He is, that's why I married him." It's crazy. And so don't feed pigeons, right? And then I couldn't process this because we were in shock of how rude this person was. I was at 8:30 in the morning as a family, and I was in shock. And so I had to go for a long run by myself in the afternoon. It takes around 15 kilometers to process this kind of stuff, right? And then I asked, so what would Jesus have done? And so Jesus would ask the question, but then I reminded that Jesus didn't say a single thing when he was being led to the cross. He just was led to the slaughter like a lamb. But okay, I can do that. But the hardest thing that I realized that I had to let die was for half a day, I was having payback rumination in my head. Don't we all do that? What would I have said if I was more smart, more witty? How could I have offended her character and been mean to her to make her cry and be sorry about herself? I was having this ruminate throughout my head for half a day. And I realized I had to let that die. And I prayed and I asked God, help remove this death. If I had paid her back straight then and there, guess what would have grown? Death would have grown. And so I've made a choice in 2026 to not let payback rumination be a thing and allow God to guide my heart. And this is a battle that we all face. It says in 2 Corinthians, as we come to close, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. This is the new economy. It doesn't make sense. But instead of dying a death, a spiritual death, we get spiritual life. We win. We get peace when other people don't have peace. It doesn't make sense, but it works and it will be good for you. And so, as a final question to close, what is one thing to let die so God can plant new life? Let's just reflect for a little bit. We'll have some keys in the background and then we'll close off with prayer. Let's reflect quietly, just with ourselves for a short moment. And so, God, we have this big challenge ahead of us, that we aren't to do more all the time. We aren't to take more responsibility. That New Year, New You isn't a gym membership as such always. But perhaps it's a heart change. Perhaps it's letting die a self-defeating narrative, obsession with body weight. Perhaps it's letting die a wound that we need to process and finally speak to someone about it and process it and heal from it. Perhaps it's letting die a grudge that we've held on for a long time. Perhaps it's letting die the perception that we aren't good enough or I'm not good enough and that we don't measure up to your standard or anybody's standard. Because Jesus, it's true that you said that unless something dies, it's really hard to have new life. And so Jesus, I pray that we have the courage to be able to call that thing out, the thing that aggravates us the most, that consumes our heart space the most. We call it out, and we give it to you. You say, Jesus, I give this thing to you, and in Jesus' name, I declare it has no more power over my life. Jesus, do a new work in my heart. I pray that we pray together. In your most powerful name we say, amen.